For 10 minutes I tried to look as if I was doing something, moving bits of apparatus, taking the occasional apparently casual glance at the examination paper. After 11 minutes of this useless activity, I realized that I didn't know how to do a single experiment. For the first time I experienced the full force of an attack of ignorance. Ears full of cotton wool, eyes staring into a tyro-blenching void, legs that wouldn't move. Time seemed to stand still, although a strange feeling in the nape of my buttocks told me that it wasn't. Bang! Someone 2 benches away had apparently exploded and was being covered in an asbestos sheet by the invigilator and 2 attendants. Bang! Came from behind me as a young gentleman from Hong Kong ran for a fire extinguisher. Then, bang! As fragments of a Liebig condenser flew around the room like shrapnel. Now I knew why they had brown walls in there. Stop! Everybody stop! Right, if I find any more of you bloody idiots heating up ether over an open flame, I'll kill you! I haven't been a munitions expert in 2 world wars to get slaughtered by a load of ignorant tits! If you don't know what you're doing, get out! This didn't have a calming effect on anyone, but it did interrupt the trance-like state of the student opposite me, who began putting chemicals into a beaker. He measured out some pale blue liquid with confidence, added some white powder, poured in 5 cc's of a colourless solution, placed it over a Bunsen burner, and the contents of the beaker went a rather pleasing shade of orange. The man knew what he was doing, and I followed every move he made. I looked round to see what everyone else was doing, to double-check. After a series of manipulations, we both finished up with a greyish powdery residue. From the wording of the question, this should really have been white, but I was quite pleased at having any residue at all under the circumstances. However, my helpful friend wasn't satisfied with the impurity of his product. He must have the best. And reaching for the bang! The next time I took organic chemistry, I was completely confident. Everyone appeared to be watching me, and I was no longer frightened by the brown walls and the immense array of bottles and chemicals, and got a perfectly white crystalline substance. The same invigilator was present on his podium, and seemed much calmer, less imposing than the year before. He didn't even mind the odd bang. I expect his wife was no longer unfaithful, or he'd had his piles removed. I wasn't surprised that I passed. After all, I was, at Cambridge. I'd bought a gown, several club ties, walked around in a tweed suit with a pipe and tried to look clever. The pipe was very useful because it meant that if anyone said anything I didn't understand, I could puff on it and seem incredibly deep in thought. The tweed suit didn't fool anybody, but the pipe worked a treat. In tutorials, I was asked fewer questions. It also helped clobber the stench of formalin in the dissecting rooms. This is one of the many hurdles in medicine. The first is dissecting a worm, a dogfish, and a rabbit at school, then your very first real dead human being. I got over them, and within 2 weeks I was conveniently using my cadaver's mouth as an ashtray. My tutor in physiology, Professor McKenna, was a Scotsman who now lives in Dunedin, New Zealand, so obviously you would use the word doer in describing him, but it wouldn't be true. He was a tall, fat, randy bastard with a goatee beard and a very agile mind above it. Again, at tutorials, we all giggled at Hibben, and the other 4 of us were rather glad that he took up so much of the professor's time by questioning him. So he very rarely got round to discussing our essays. Footnote: essay, a collection of other people's thoughts disguised to look like one's own, in the judging of which originality is heavily penalised. After about 5 sessions, Professor McKenna became irritated with our tittering and rounded on us and said, "I like Hibben. Unlike the rest of you, he knows how to ask the question why. A habit that gets knocked out of us by parents at a very early age when it should be a gift to be nurtured." We crept out with our notebooks full of humility. It was one of the few really important things I learned at Cambridge. But I still think I'd know more about the physiology of the human body than the urinary system if Hibben hadn't asked why quite so often. Professor McKenna's little lecture had inspired him to ask why at every possible occasion, and he often astounded ordinary passers-by asking them why.